From Glitch HQ on Riverside Avenue in smooth operating collectible Minneapolis, this is Nice Games Club, the show where nice game devs talk gaming and game development.
I'm Martha McGarry, and I make nice games.
I'm Stephen McGregor, and I make nice games.
And I'm Arthur Croy, I too make nice games.
For this week's episode, our topics are optimization strategies and Pokemon. And so, if everyone is ready,
let's start.
Dance break.
Speaking of breaks.
Transition.
Yeah. Just when I finally learned how these work. It's pretty much our 2-year anniversary.
Yes.
Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday, Nice Games Club. Happy birthday to us.
Am I okay to go now?
I mean, you can try.
So we've been doing this show for 2 years, and we haven't missed a week.
Yes.
I think when we started, we were not pushing ourselves too hard to do an episode every week.
Yeah.
But we haven't missed a single one. We've put out 2 in some weeks. And so in these 2 years, we've put out, including this one, 112 episodes of the program. That's pretty exciting. And the reason we're talking about it, sort of summarizing, other than our 2-year anniversary, is that we're going to take a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
Now, don't worry. You're still going to get new episodes each week. They're just going to be old new episodes.
So if you're a new listener and you're wondering how to start on this 112 episode backlog, we'll pick some really good ones that we like that you can listen to and remember if you've heard them before or enjoy them for the first time.
Yeah. Our audience now is probably about 4 times larger than it was in the first 6 months when we were doing it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who are current listeners who haven't heard some of the older episodes just because who wants to dig that far back? But we'll do it for you. And then we'll each pick a couple, introduce them and talk a little bit about why we liked them. And then play them back for you. And that's going to be for the next couple of weeks.
Yes.
We're not exactly sure exactly how many weeks, but it'll be at least a month. And why is that, Stephen?
Because we are all working on Widget Satchel now. We pulled Martha in.
Yeah.
So we've decided that we really want to get Widget Satchel finished up. And we wanted to take some time to finish that up in the coming weeks. And we'll talk about it when we get back and tell you the whole process and why we decided to take a hiatus on Nice Games Club to get it done and how it went and our struggles and not struggles and such like that.
Struggles and not struggles. That's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do some on the spot recording of meetings and stuff like that. I can't.
Well,
talk.
Martha, you just promised it, so.
Well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to bring the task cam recorder to some of our work days.
You mean a task microphone recording, so I don't have to be on camera?
It's not. That's just the brand.
Is that? Oh, they have just microphones.
Tascam is like the Kleenex of portable recorders.
Oh,
it's it is actually a Tascam, right?
Yeah,
but that's just the name you give to.
It's not a camera.
No.
Oh,
I'm not sure. I don't know what does it stand for anything? Is it short for anything?
No idea.
We'll do some research and get back to you in a couple weeks.
All right.
Not that I've promised too many things, but.
Yeah, but we've talked on the show before about side projects and what it takes to be motivated to keep doing them.
Yeah.
And we've always talked about Nice Games Club as all of our side projects. It can't be our main thing because otherwise we wouldn't be valuable as hosts on this program. And so Widget Satchel being another side project for most of the people on the team, we thought we'd just muscle out Nice Games Club briefly. But I think it'll be really fun for listeners to hear some of these old episodes and get some of our new takes on them.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that it's going to be a win-win.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear people's discussions on old episodes because we have a larger community now and we have places where
that's right. People talk about the show now in a way they didn't when we started, and so it'll be cool to hear some of those. Recycling.
And there's one episode where there was too much content to fit in one episode, so I broke off a little part of it and that we'll release that as a little bonus in there, so you won't have too many weeks of no new episodes.
Right, a little bit of original content squeezed in there that Martha
an oasis of original content.
But in the meantime, though, for this week, you've got a whole brand new episode to dig into before we take the time. So I guess we'll start with.
It seems like when we're taking a hiatus, it's because we're optimizing our workflow.
Okay.
On Widget Satchel.
You really got to get those in because it's going to be a while before you have the chance.
I know,
again.
right? That one was a little rough, but.
Okay, yeah, it's my topic, optimization strategies, and it's something I've wanted to talk about on the show as a topic for a while. But we've brought it up a lot in other topics we've done, which is just ways to work better. Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is going to be code, but some of it is going to be like workflow optimization. Yeah. And it's not an exhaustive list. It's more about a lot of examples that sort of get you in that mindset. And so we'll talk about some Unity specific things because I think that's certainly most of the people who listen to the show are familiar with Unity, but it applies to other frameworks and coding styles as well.
A good question. Is our community mainly Unity developers?
That's a good point.
A lot of us are Minnesota developers, and we mainly use Unity, right?
I'm making an assumption based on sort of like the general development community, but I don't know that for sure. Actually, you should get back at us. Send us a tweet at Nice Games Club.
Yeah.
Let us know if you use something other than Unity.
Yeah.
Because I do sometimes, and I always lament that like Unity is like 90% of what people talk about and seem to be in front of all the time. And I know, Martha, you've become less and less a fan of Unity the more you use it, right?
Well, mostly because there's a lot of things where people, like, I will be confused on a thing and then I will go on the internet or somewhere and be like, how do I do this thing? And then what?
First mistake going on the internet?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's always a mistake. But most of the time people will, like, especially I see here event something. I still don't understand how those work. Mm-hmm. And all the tutorials that I found are like, just use the event system. I'm like, no one has explained what that means ever.
There's definitely a chicken and the egg problem with Unity where even some like general programming concepts, Unity handles it in just a slightly different way where it's like, oh, normally with 10% of the problem you can solve by using this built-in Unity thing, do that. And you're like, which 10%? So it's not always great. Okay, well, let's get into it. The first thing I want to talk about is, especially for game developers, and this is true of Unity, but it's true of other frameworks as well, using update loops. Mm-hmm. It's a thing. Update loops are like the heart and soul of a game project, right? It's something code that runs every frame. Mm-hmm. It's not, but most software doesn't work that way. But games almost always work that way.
Right.
At least they work that way for most of their components. And I think when you start developing in libraries and frameworks that use update loops or that have them built-in update loops, and Unity is one of them, but also it's true for, and even going back to Flash development, like based on the timeline, like it was all, you'd run code on frames. Like just the metaphor exists everywhere. Mm-hmm. But the trick is it's really easy to start to run a lot of code you don't need to run. And so one of the things that I've been doing a lot that I've brought in from other work that I've done in other frameworks is as a pattern, not as an ability, because Unity can do this, of course, is using event systems. Or not event systems, rather, but events, right? Event systems is like a whole different thing in Unity. And Martha, that's the thing they tell you to use. And what is that? It's a similar, Anyway, events are basically function calls or functions that you or it's like a list of functions. Yeah. And you continually add additional functions to them. And then you have things that listen for the dispatch of this event. Yes. And then when the event is dispatched, then all of the functions that you've registered to the event will run. Yeah. And this is really great for object-oriented programming because it's a way for like classes to talk to each other without actually talking to each other. It's basically you take a megaphone into the park square and you say like, here's a thing that happened. And all the people in the park that were listening for that thing, then do what they do with that information. Right. You as the person with the megaphone, the person who dispatches the event, you are not running that code. Mm-hmm. You are just saying, here's an event, and then everyone says, upon that event, I do this. Yes. So everything is still properly encapsulated. And that's a thing you'll hear a lot when you're doing object-oriented programming, is that you want each bit of code to know as little as possible about the rest of the code. And events are a way to do that in a way that is architecturally sound, but also is a little more efficient than just running a loop and checking for like a Boolean to like see if something's going to happen or not. Yeah. Or to have a class that has a reference to another class that you have to feed it and then just like says that class dot function, like that becomes really dependent then. Well, what if you change, I mean, you can refactor and change names. That's not a big problem. But what if you change the design of that thing? What if you say, I don't want to run this function. I want to run these two functions instead. Well, then now you have to go back into the other class and it gets really complicated. But if all you're doing is listening for that event, then you can handle all of the behavior upon when that happens within the class that hears it. And other classes that hear it as well. So a great use for this is in our game, we have an event called on checkpoint, where when Sprocket reaches a checkpoint in a level, it does some stuff with the save system. It saves all the data that needs to save, but it also sends out dispatches an event called on checkpoint. And things that listen for that are bots, the enemies, widgets, pieces of junk, all of those things, all the rest of the stuff in the game that the Sprocket character, the checkpoint object, the level object, they don't actually know or can directly access those objects without a really complicated structure of references. All of those objects then said, hey, Sprocket reached a checkpoint. I'm going to take this information about my current state and I'm going to register it to the save data object so that it can save it to disk. And you do it kind of in a bottom-up kind of approach that way. Because the save data object is something that is static and is referenced by everything. So that's a case where instead of saying, have references to all these things in the save data object, you have a reference to one thing in many objects. I mean, it does the same thing, but it ends up being less complicated architecturally. And I've gotten into versus update loops all the way to how you structure your code. But that's the thing about a lot of these techniques is that they serve two purposes.
Yes, I want to bring up that I think we talked about this during our Vengeance code comment episode, but we also used events a lot. Well, we didn't exactly use them for optimization explicitly, but I used them to we have augments in the game where you can change your ship and change how it affects stuff and things, and you can attach yourself to a certain object, or a certain event. So we have an on shoot event where the player shoots or a bullet comes out of their cannon. Then
I've heard that's what shooting is.
I do want to make a distinction that there's the pressing the button shoot, and then there's also when a bullet comes out, because you can just hold the button down and you're still technically shooting.
Oh, I see what you mean.
When a bullet comes out, sometimes something has to happen. So then when this event is called, then the augment can attach itself to it, and then maybe I don't know, increase that bullet's damage by 30% or something. I don't know, numbers and such. That is another thing. I also want to make a shout out to coroutines. This isn't exactly related to events, but
you'll notice I did not put coroutines on this list.
I got you covered.
Okay.
I like coroutines specifically for things that need to loop, but just for a period of time. So if you only need something to loop for 3 seconds or something, a coroutine makes way more sense than to take a Boolean, put it in an event or put it in an update loop.
Right.
Because then that code will just stop and you won't have to it won't come up again. So it doesn't have to run after it does its thing.
Right. And the advantage of coroutines is that they do that. They're independent of the update loop.
Yes.
But they run every update.
Yeah.
Right. At least in Unity. They don't run. When I was putting the coroutines together the first time in Unity, I was like, the way this code looks, it looks like it just runs this function over and over and over again until the time is up. But that's not what it does at all. It runs it every frame, once every frame.
Yeah.
The syntax does not seem to reveal that that's the case, but that is how it works. And so, it's nice, but the syntax is a little hairy and a little strange. And you get in the habit.
Yeah.
But I've built something in Widget Satchel. And because Steve and I are both working on it, it's a mix of these things. I guess the main thing about optimizing your workflow is whatever works.
Yeah, right.
But I use a timer class, and Unity doesn't have this built in, but this is something I'm used to from Flash, which has a first class citizen class called timer, where you create a new timer object. You say how many milliseconds will it run, how many times will it run, and what function will it run when it's done, or on every tick of the timer. So we have a timer. So I rebuilt this class in C# for Widget Satchel. And other people have built very similar things. You can find a lot of free code online for this. It's not built into the Unity API, which is very frustrating, but it's really nice because you can say, run it twice a frame or 4 times a frame, or run this code once every 3 seconds, or only run a piece of code after 3 seconds. So it's fully customizable. And you can pause the timer, you can restart it and all of that. And so I prefer that structure over coroutines because coroutines have kind of a very rigid thing of what you can do. And it still is running code every frame.
I mean, yeah.
Which, it only runs it for a while. You don't have to store a Boolean and then just like have it, not do anything most of the time. So it's definitely better having a series of coroutines than putting all of your code in update.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't know. I think there's like a lot of really like fair and healthy debates about what's better. And better is like better for like, does it run faster or is it better for, is it easier to build, easier to maintain? Those are all things you should think about when you do this sort of stuff and decide what you care most about in the moment. So one of the things I just did is that we have all the checkpoints in Widget Satchel. The level needs to keep track of them for reasons. Yeah. And so we just have a list or an array on the main level controller object, which just keeps track of all the things. And because there's only like at most, between 2 and 4 checkpoints in every level, that's something you just manually manage, right? But I was testing something where I just added a checkpoint right next to another one just so I could run back and forth between them to test something. And it wasn't working. And I was really confused why. I was like, oh, right, because I have to add it to that list at the beginning. So I'm like, I'm just going to like make that something that just searches for checkpoints in the level. And it uses a very slow function to do that. Yeah. Find objects of type or something like that.
Right, yeah.
And that is inefficient from a programming perspective or from a runtime perspective, but it's much faster for me to build the thing. And it's in frame 1 of a level load, which it takes a long time.
Already frozen.
So the overall performance of the game took a tiny hit so that our work can improve. Now, when we're done with the game, we could reverse that optimization, that workflow optimization, but I don't think we're going to.
No, and so it's not a big enough of a hit for it to.
Right. It matters more to me as we build it than it's going to be for the rest of time when players load each level. That extra 1.5 milliseconds probably it's going to take. So yeah, your priorities are different as you do these different things.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's through the first of my big list of things. So we'll see if we can tear through these a little faster. One of the things I learned recently in Unity specifically is a function called onValidate. Now, a thing that I've done in Widget Satchel, and you've seen in the code comment for Widget Satchel, if you go back and look at that, is this script called AutoSnap. And it's a thing to make level editing in Widget Satchel easier. So that every time you move an object, it snaps it to a grid, basically of your defining. Now, the way I built that was by checking in every update. Now, it's an editor script, so update only gets called when something changes in the editor. I think even if you just click in the space of the editor, it'll call it, but it's not every frame of the editor.
Yeah, right.
So it's more efficient to use update code in an editor script. Anyways, but it turns out there's an even faster way to do it, which is called onValidate. Now, it's not going to work for transform objects because they're a separate object, and that's a Unity problem. But onValidate is a function that is you put in a mono behavior, and it runs when something in the inspector changes on that component.
Yeah.
So it's what people use it for generally is if you have a number box that you as the developer know needs to be values between 1 and 100, but you don't want to use a slider or anything. You want to actually just let people enter in numbers, paste them from a spreadsheet or whatever. But you don't want people to enter invalid numbers. You can say, well, onValidate, check that field, and if it's not correct, either revert it or change it to the upper bounds or lower bounds of the valid numbers, maybe even throw a warning. This is great for when you're designing your code and then you're handing your project to level designers who are not going to be working on the code. So onValidate, that's why it's called onValidate. It's meant to validate variables. Another fun thing you can do with it, though, is when you change, for example, in Widget Satchel, when you change a piece of art, you say, this art tile is going to be style A, which is a certain kind of a certain sprite. But I want to change it to style B. So it's just an enum. That's just A or B. Change it to B. Then onValidate runs and says, okay, it's B now. Now I'm going to go pull this asset and change it in the editor. So you can use onValidate for a lot more than just validating values. You can use it to actually run code. And it's great when you want to configure objects in your game. If you look at the code comment on Widget Satchel, I demonstrate a little bit of how when you change these variables, stuff happens to the objects. But that was all using those update. It was all using update code. And the problem with that is that runs every time update runs in the editor, which isn't as much as in the game. But with so many objects on screen, And running all that code all the time, even if you haven't made any changes, even if it's just checking a Boolean, can get really heavy. And so changing it to onValidate means it only runs on the object that you're working with, and only when you change an object on it. It's not as easy to use necessarily, but it made performance in the editor a little better.
Yeah.
That was really fun. So onValidate, using it for off-label use is something I definitely recommend in Unity projects. And I just discovered that pretty recently. So that was pretty exciting. What else we got? Another cool thing I learned. Sorry, you going to say that?
I was just probably going to say the next thing you're going to say.
Okay. I learned something like just 2 days ago, and it's a C# specific thing. I think it's available in other languages, but not in any of the other ones I've used. A thing called static constructors. And a static constructor, so let's say you have a function or a class that is like a game manager class or something that has a lot of static variables, right? Or a utilities class that has a lot of static functions. When you call those things in your code, you don't call them with an instance of the class. You call them by class dot whatever the static property or variable or whatever it is.
Right.
A static constructor, now let's say you have a list, right? And you define a list, but you also want to populate the list with members of the same class. So let's say you say, in our case, we have, save operations. This is the static class I'm talking about.
Sure, okay.
Save operations is a class in Widget Satchel that is mostly has static variables for you to call, like save this data slot, load this one, delete this one. The problem is that you need code to operate on these objects before you need them. And so generally in the first frame of your project, you put like save operations.initialize or something. Your own function that sort of sets up what you need to use for the rest of the thing. So we have an array called save datas, which consists of the save data, the 3 save data slots. And they're empty, but they need to all exist in that array at the start of the game. And so you need to have a function that just adds them to that. Now, that's great, but if you have a static constructor, and the way you do that is, we'll put the link for the Microsoft documentation, the C# stuff, but it's just static and then the name of the class. So it's not public function or public void or any of that stuff. It's just static name of the class. It's very simple syntax. And then it's just a function. You can't give it any arguments. There's normal constructors you can give arguments to.
Yeah.
In Unity, you almost never do, but you can. But that code runs anytime or the first time you access a member of that class. So if you if we have a static constructor that puts all our save datas in our save datas array, that code hasn't run yet when you open the thing. But as soon as you say save operations.save datas, index A or whatever, then it's going to say, okay, I need a static member of this class. Before I do that, I'm going to run the static constructor.
Oh, now I know what you're talking about.
Then I'll access that variable.
Yes.
And so I don't need to put anywhere in my code that .initialize.
Yes.
And what's nice about that is that because you don't know necessarily when that's going to happen. And what's great about it too is that when you're working in the editor or you're not going through your application when you're testing it from the beginning, because if you only initialize things in the title screen scene of your game, then when you try to test your game from like a level in the middle, usually you need these helper scripts and these helper things to like do all that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But if you use static constructors, there are many cases where you don't have to bother with that.
Yeah. We had some of that stuff in Treasure Stack, and my supervisor removed all of those in there because they were bad or dangerous for some reason, and I don't remember why.
Well, it's still tricky because they only run once. And so when you're relying on them for editor functionality, then the time it runs is in the middle of you working on your project.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not when you launch the project necessarily. So if you need to change those values and change how the initialization would work, then it can be kind of tricky. And this is a Unity specific problem because Unity, like the thing about the code you write, your C# code, that's not your application code, right? It gets compiled down to C++, but like your code can run in the editor and almost everything is serialized and it's like none of it makes any sense. So things like that, which are really good for if your project is just code, it's great, right?
Yeah.
But in the case of Unity, there are instances where that code can run way earlier than you want it to, and then never run again until you I'm not actually sure what happens in some of those cases. You might have to close and reopen Unity because Unity is the application that's running it.
Yeah.
And so that's the instance of it happening. Now, if it's initialization code that never needs to change, needs to run once sometime, then it's still a really good idea because you can bounce in the middle of a game or whatever,
right?
In Unity. But there are times when it can be a little tricky. So use with caution, I suppose.
I guess there are instances when, like, well, if, for example, if you have a game manager and you have like an instant static variable, and that like you can use that to initialize something. If you don't have a game object that has a game manager in it, that could cause problems unless you make a game object that creates a game manager and attaches a game manager to the component or to that game object.
Yeah, and the tricky thing about instancing, so you're talking about singletons.
Singleton.
Which I think we'll just blow past because that's a whole other topic on its own. But a static constructor cannot register a class as an instance.
Yeah.
You can't say instance equals this in a static constructor because this is outside the scope of the static constructor, right? Yeah. You need to put that in a function that's not static, right? Because it needs to run on that instance of the thing. So if you're using a lot of singleton patterns, then static constructors could be something you replace the singleton pattern with. It's not something that can work side by side that efficiently.
Yes. Also, don't use a lot of those.
You'll find the more you work with code, the more you find that like they're not always as necessary as you think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also it's your code, do what you want. But like,
good point.
But I've had hard time with singletons. So
yeah.
But I bet you can use them better than I can.
This is a fun one that I always have to go in and like modify my project after the fact.
Yeah.
Is I always want to replace string literals with static constants. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so a string literal is just a open quote, close quote in your code, right?
String, yeah.
It's just a string that you have in your code. And rather than, literally just as you type it into your editor, that's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that those are not variables that if you need to change the value of that or change the name of it. So string literals are fine in a lot of cases, but the way that they're bad is when they reference names of things, like rather than content itself. So if you have a string literal that's like a bit of dialogue in your game and you're not going to localize and you're the only person working on it, then it's perfectly fine to put all that in the code rather than maintain a separate spreadsheet you load in, because as long as you have spell check somehow, it's just you typing it in the same way so that you're not improving any efficiency by removing that. But if you have a string literal that is the name of a input action, fire or jump, and then you need to call that, whether you're using Rewired or just the Unity's native input or any other input system in your other framework, and you have an action, and then you feed it an argument, which is going to be a string, which is the name of the action. Well, what happens if you change the name of that action? You have to find and replace all of those instances. What if you have a similar variable that is a similar name, and suddenly your find and replace gets all caught up? So the thing I always do with these things is I have a class that has a ton of static constants that are just and that are all just the names of the strings that I want, and then they have variable names, and so you can autocomplete them. You can feed your argument instead of a string literal. You can feed it a static class dot name of variable, and then it's very much going to be usually the same as the actual string. The convention for this in a lot of languages is that you use all caps for string literal constants. You can do whatever you want, but it's nice. It's a habit I have. And that's really useful, especially for inputs. Now, the problem for for input actions and stuff is that there's usually like a Rewired editor or a Unity a settings area where you do have to manually type in all that stuff. So if you ever change it, you need to change it there.
Change it in one place, though.
You need to change it there and in your class where you've declared all that. Yeah. But that's it.
That's only.
It's still one more than you do in other frameworks, but that's way better than the 15, 30 you have to do in a lot of other places.
Are there a lot of string literals on web development?
I'm just like baffled by what you guys are talking about, because like, why wouldn't it be a variable?
That's the exact right attitude. Is like, why wouldn't it be a variable? Sometimes it's not, and the standard structures sort of lean you away from it. And it's up to you to say, no, it should be a variable. But in order to do that, you need to then register a bunch of these things in your own class so you can pass.
See, I don't really use languages that need classes or anything like that.
Okay.
I use languages that are McDonald's about everything. So you just put all the things in the thing and then you do the thing. PHP and JavaScript pretty much do whatever.
Yeah.
What does McDonald's mean?
Have you seen that meme?
Oh, we're going to have to put that in the show notes.
It's a triangle, and the top of the meme, it says the kids are screaming, let's go to McDonald's, McDonald's, McDonald's.
Yeah.
And then on the meme, the triangle of the meme, there's like 3 different answers that the parent could give. And then you put whatever you're putting into that metaphor, you place it around the triangle to say how
close to the extremes
each thing is. And there's one which I have to find now, which I've had a really hard time finding, but it's all the programming languages.
Yeah.
And like one of the answers is we have food at home. And that is like C or something.
Sure.
Then, and then one answer is drives into the drive-thru, orders just a black coffee, and then leaves.
Oh, dang.
And then the third answer is the parent also starts screaming, McDonald's, McDonald's, McDonald's. And that's PHP.
Okay. I understand now.
And JavaScript is totally off the chart in its own area where it lives in McDonald's.
It lives in McDonald's. It serves you the food. That's something else. Okay. So clearly web development is way different than how we were like approaching it. Almost.
I mean, I'm going to have to learn all this because my new job is all going to be C#.
Yeah, Martha got a new job.
Yeah, I got a new job.
Brought that up. New meta.
Meta. Anyway, I don't know how much of this will be left in the episode, but I'm going to have to learn all this stuff because I'm going to actually have to be using C# for reals, .NET, whatever. So I'm going to have to like actually pay attention to static and not static and all this stuff that I've managed to ignore for a long time.
Well, interestingly, a lot of the times these types of problems are usually framework specific. So like the reason that we talk about in Unity a lot is because input actions, you feed them a string literal for the action jump, because you don't store that as a variable. You have that in a configuration file somewhere. And it needs to just check against it.
Yeah.
Where instead of a piece of code you've done. Also, animation state names. Play, and then you feed it a string, which is the name of a state that you've done in your animation.
Yeah.
But and that is just you type somewhere in a dialog box rather than it being a variable. So those are all framework specific reasons why you would end up with a bunch of string literals all over your project. But it's not a language problem exactly. But the solution is pretty easy for object-oriented languages because you can have these static variables you reference everywhere, but don't clutter up your like main application script or anything like that. It's extra code you write so you can do less writing later, basically. But that's true of a lot of these things. Is like they really sometimes you're never going to need these solutions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like optimization is different for different languages and different frameworks.
Mm-hmm. Huh. One of the things, another Unity thing that that I learned from Andy Korth on our Verdant Skies code comment episode is this thing he did where he has a class that has static or his serialized references. The class itself is static, and the serialized references that show up in the editor.
Yeah,
and then he feeds them a bunch of objects from the library. Or from the project pane, so that all of his code has easy access to these pieces in the project without having to have references themselves that then you have to drag into the editor.
Yeah,
and that is the smartest thing I've ever seen in a Unity project.
Yeah, we do that too. And
we don't have any of that in Widget Satchel because we're like too far built for me to come up with a perfect reason to use it. But like next project, the first thing I'm setting up is just a list of stuff.
It's super convenient. Yeah,
because then you can just because I work better in Unity when I'm writing code than when I'm in the editor. In the editor, I'm always like dragging stuff around and clicking stuff and being like, why doesn't it do what I want it to do? Whereas in code, I can just do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And so I'm much happier working there. So the more I can be out of the editor, the more I can be in my code editor.
That's a good point because like I think that everybody is different too. So like different optimization strategies will maybe even impede progress. For example, I prefer using the editor, the Unity editor, than going into code. So I will frequently like code things to make sure that I have to not go back to the code later on. And so that to me is a better workflow. So like, I think it's like, you got to make sure you understand your particular workflow and what works best for you and what doesn't work best for you.
Yeah. And how you work with your teammates. So one of the things I didn't understand when we first started making Widget Satchel, but made more sense the more I worked with everybody is our main character has a bunch of exposed variables in the editor that are like jump resistance and timer cooldowns and all these variables that you'd tweak if you were making a fighting game. And I was like, well, because Lane and Steven wrote this, so like clearly it's probably where their attitude comes from with their numbers, background, and fingens and all that. But the reason you do that is so you can make changes quickly and test them in the editor.
Right.
But for me, my instinct is just to have those variables in a class somewhere and just change them there. If I need to change them.
Yeah.
But I didn't understand the sort of the friction that would cause.
Right. If you do it in Unity, it has to recompile the code every time you do it. So it just takes longer.
Right. I mean, that's literally the part of it as well. It's just it does actually literally take longer.
Right.
Which I didn't appreciate at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I was thinking of is like, well, what happens when we're done? We've decided what these numbers are, and they're just sitting there ready to be messed with.
Yeah.
And then they exist as serialized variables, which can be corrupted and they scare the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
But the benefit is so much greater than I assumed when I first got to look at that way of working.
Mm-hmm.
I want to have as little exposed things in the inspector as possible, but that's because that's how I've worked in the past.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, you really have to think about not just like what type of optimization you want, but also like what, not just your specific use case, but also like working with others and like what their use case might be, especially if you're working with members of the team which aren't doing the same things that you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. You have to sort of like imagine yourself as them. And what would be easy for them to use if they're going to be the ones interacting with this part of the program more than, say, I am in the person who's building it.
This is particularly important if you're, just building tools for the rest of the people in your project.
Yeah,
which happens a lot of times in AAA development, especially.
Mm-hmm. And that's we talk a little bit about editor stuff, editor tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked about it on the show before, and we talked about it earlier with this like auto snap stuff that we've done.
Yeah.
But there's two ways you can do editor stuff in Unity. One is you write editor scripts. Which are specifically, they have their own API and they're specific for editor stuff. You can make extra panel windows. You can add things to the file menus. You can really like tear apart and rebuild the editor any way you want.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can use a thing called execute in edit mode, which is a tag you put on a class. And we're going to have to put links for a lot of this stuff so you can search it on your own because it's not going to be easy to describe it fully here. Yeah. So we're just going to blow by some of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a way for you to run your scripts in the editor before you're hitting play. There's a whole API that's part of the editor application package. So you can say editor application.isPlaying is a Boolean that will let you know if the editor is playing or not. But of course, you can only check that if you're using these particular packages, and those packages won't go in your final build. And so there's caveats to using this stuff.
Yeah.
But you don't have to necessarily use editor scripts, which when people search, how do I make an editor script? They're like, I don't know what to do. You can just use some of this functionality in your own scripts. The trick is encapsulating that behavior so you don't over encumber scripts with like the play portion and the editor portion.
Yeah.
And that can be kind of tricky structurally designing.
Yeah.
But it can be extremely useful for certain things to get things done in the editor to make yourself work faster, particularly if you are building tools for the rest of the team or for yourself, or if you're trying to build a framework that you can then, say, put on the asset store or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Let's move on to working strategies, because I think we could talk about code stuff like forever and ever and ever. I think the attitude is the important part. Is to like, generally try to run as little code as possible every frame. Try to run only the code you need to run. And now, of course, your style is going to be different. You can either write a big inefficient ball of spaghetti just to get your ideas on paper, to use a metaphor, and then go and clean it up later. Or you can start working on thinking of those things a little ahead of time. We'll talk about pre-optimization in a bit. But people have different attitudes. I tend to be more of the thinking about it now instead of later.
Mm-hmm.
I try to spin it out in my mind a little bit. That might mean that I'm a little slower in terms of like throwing up new ideas, but it also saves me a lot of time on the tail end. But that's not a better way of working.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of working.
Right,
so you'll find your own balance of that sort of stuff.
Yes.
As long as you get there in the end, is the really
that's what's important.
Yeah, exactly.
The game is out.
And that's why we're going on hiatus.
Right.
So we can get this thing out. But just a bit about some working strategies. I use a lot of file syncing. We talked about this a little bit earlier before we started the show. Because we're going to work on Widget Satchel today after the recording. And Martha was saying, I forgot these little things I was working on. I don't have them with me, but it's okay. I don't need them. And I was confused. I'm like, can't you just grab them for wherever you sync and store all your files? And you're like, wait, what? Because apparently I'm the only one who has like ready access to everything I've ever built in my entire life at my fingertips all the time.
I like the way you described it.
It takes some work setting up, but it's really, really useful. And like, I recommend people start thinking about how they might want to do this. Like, especially if you have a laptop, if you work with a team, you're going to go somewhere to work, and then you're going to go home or to your day job, and you're going to have different machines probably. If you're just a one laptop person and your whole life is on there, then great. Have a backup solution and you're fine. But in my case, I have a workstation at home. I have my laptop that I keep here at Glitch and use at my desk here. And then I work at other machines sometimes when I need to. And so I use OneDrive for syncing a lot of project files. I have a terabyte on there. You can get that with Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever. And that's great. That's not going to store all your data if you have as much data as I do. But I also have backup solutions for, I have a local NAS server that backs up every night. And then I also have a remote backup service. There's two big ones, Backblaze and CrashPlan. And they're not like Dropbox. They keep your stuff in a bunker somewhere in case your apartment catches fire. Basically, that's the idea.
Or the zombie apocalypse. It's
not meant for syncing. You're not meant to use that or go browse it. Although there are apps you can go and they have apps where you can browse your archives. So I'm like backed up everywhere, but and I have access to my things. But things that are not in my file sharing or file syncing thing, if I ever need that stuff on my phone and on all my computers, I have remote desktop. So any one of my machines can take a look into any other ones. Now, my phone is always on with me, but my laptop's not always on. But my machine at home is a server class desktop. It's on 24 hours a day. So if I ever need a file, for example, if you said, hey, do you have any drawings from middle school you made in MS Paint? I could get that for you in like 5 minutes.
We're putting that in the show notes.
Yes, please.
We're doing that. That's happening now.
And so how you set this up for yourself is different depending on what you need. For example, you may just need to like put your project into Dropbox or whatever, and then that will help you a little bit. Or you can have my attitude, which is just like always have everything you've ever done and touched available. And it's now that it's set up, like I have so little stress about that kind of stuff. When I work when I work at Widget Satchel here at Glitch, I don't need to push anything to the repo to keep working on it at home. I just wait for OneDrive to sync, and then I can just start working at home. Which also means I probably do fewer commits than I should.
Oh yeah, committing. You should probably just commit rather regularly after you do something major. Just just do it.
Oh, here's a good tip that I haven't put into play yet, but it just occurred to me was a really good idea. If you're using a GUI like source tree, or you're super good at the command line, you can selectively commit. Instead of committing all of your changes, you can selectively commit certain changes. So if you've done a lot of work on a lot of different systems in your game and you want to commit all of that, but you don't want to like anger your teammates who maybe want to roll back or cherry pick a little bit, you can just make 6 commits for each of the things you changed in whatever order makes sense to you. Of course you can do that, but it just occurred to me like, that would solve a lot of the problems I have, which is not making enough regular commits when I make changes. And I'm regularly working on 3 or 4 things at the same time, but they're not all ready yet to be committed. So
an additional benefit to that is if one of the 6 things you commit breaks, you can just go back to the things before it instead of this giant commit is all broken now.
Yes. So. You can revert specific commits.
Yes.
Although that can be tricky, but it's all doable.
Yes.
I mean, if you get Martha to show you how it works, then you can make it happen.
Yes. Also, get Kraken's undo button is a lifesaver.
Yeah. Ooh. There's an undo in source tree, but it's never highlighted. So I don't even know what it's good for.
Nice.
Yeah. It's a good thing you're on the project so you can figure out our good stuff.
Yeah.
No promises.
2 other workflow things really quick. One is, and this is not good for code because code doesn't work this way. But when you're working on art assets or documents or anything that needs versioning, but you don't want to put it in a repo, you can put it in a repo fine. But for me, if I want to check out a version from 3 versions ago, I don't want to keep a complicated system like Git for managing art assets. A lot of people do that and they find that it's useful, especially when they're working on a lot of teams. But for me, I just make new versions. I very frequently I'll just update and I'll save my old files so I can go back and check rather than. And the way I do that is I semantically date. I date all of my files. So and I just use a year, month, day so that alphabetically it shows up. In my file explorer.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly useful. I do this for builds as well. When I create a new build of a game, I'll date it and then I save all the old builds because those dates are also, they're semantic. They're like, that was the date of that showing, or that was a day or 2 before or after. So it was probably for that or whatever. Yeah. And they don't need to be they're just names. They're not actual dates, right? So you can say, I'm saving a new version of this file. I'll give it today's date, but I'll keep it working in that file for 2 weeks before I make a new one. I don't need to update the date. And then when I make a new one, I'll make, whatever. Now, if I make more than one a day, which happens a lot, I will give it a suffix A, B, C, or D. And I use Starfleet, Starship naming conventions where the first variation is the first version of the day uses the date. The second one is A. And then the third one is B. Because that's how Starfleet names their starships.
Okay.
Because if you go right to B, then you start go looking for A. Like what happened to A?
Yeah.
Right. So, anyways, that's just a way I keep track of files. It's a way I don't lose data that way. And then every now and again, I go in and prune the last 30 versions or something like that. Probably not that often, but I do it. Last thing I do is speaking of semantically naming, I semantically name all my classes and objects and variables. We've talked about this on the show before. I don't think I've gotten any pushback, but I'm a really big believer in verbosity. Like just name your variable as long as it needs to be. Do not use abbreviations. Don't use suffixes. Don't use contractions. Just name it the thing you're going to name it. Yeah. If you have if you're naming an animation object, don't call it Annie. Like, even though that is going to make some sense and it's not going to confuse you, it really is not extra time to type it all out. And so, I'm a very strong believer in just being as detailed as possible when you name it.
So I largely agree with you, Mark.
Largely.
But
minor fight.
Minor fight coming in.
Fight.
But in the case of Unity specifically, like if you like using the editor and you don't like going in the code like me, if you make your verbs, your variables too long, then they won't show up in the editor you won't show the whole thing. Right.
It'll cut it off at a certain point.
If you're typing out sentences for all of your variable names, please don't do that. Well, unless you really need to, and you're not going to do it. Be really clear.
I guess the only saving grace there, because you're right, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The saving grace there is you're not going to be writing out sentences for many of your variables.
Oh yeah, and very likely if you're writing out a sentence for your variable, it's not going to show up in the editor anyways. But you should be conscious of that too.
Yeah. Now, there's two other problems with Unity. One is if you want to change the name of a variable, you will then lose your stored data if it's serialized in the editor.
Yeah.
There's a tag for that called formerly serialized as, where you can put the old name. What? Yeah, I learned about this pretty recently.
Okay.
And you know how there's the tag. If you're familiar with these, you can do hide in inspector, or you can serialize a private variable. Those are the little tags in the square brackets. There's one you can put called formerly serialized as. I think you need to import a package for that to work, but I forget what it is. It's probably like just system.serialization.
Sure.
I don't think it's a Unity package specifically,
okay.
But anyway, it's formerly serialized as, then when you go back to the editor, it will recognize that. And then once all your objects that you have that are updated and they're using the new variable, then you can delete that tag. Now, if you change the name 4 or 5 times, you can put these tags on top of each other in to formally serialize this, and that, until you have the right name that you want.
Yeah.
And then it'll keep that continuity, and then you can get rid of them when you're ready to get rid of them. It's very nice.
Yeah.
It's not a feachure I've used at all. I just learned about it recently. Mostly I just rename things that I'm willing to drag around in the inspector.
Right.
But I'm definitely going to get in that habit now, because it's going to make me a little freer with changing some dumb names I've been wanting to change for a while. I refactor all the time. That's not something a lot of people do or like to do, but most IDEs are very simple for that. And so I'll name something what I need to name it because it describes what it does. But then later, that thing no longer describes it, or I have something else that describes it better, and then this is more of a subset or any other reason. I always want to keep track of renaming those things as soon as possible, so I don't get used to a name that's not correct. And I'm willing to deal with the fallout of that, which means saving a bunch of other files or dealing with the inspector. Yeah. But having formally serialized will benefit you a lot if you're like me and are sort of churning that all the time.
As a result of that, though, variable names get changed, and I'm like, what the heck is this thing now? So
that's totally true. Yeah, right. Because you're not following that same path of logic that I am.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. That's why I name them semantically. So you can just read what it is and you know what that means.
Right.
Unless you're looking at it in the editor, then you're like, what? You're looking at half of the variable.
Yep.
Yeah. The other thing the Unity editor does, which is very annoying, is it renames your variables so that they're human readable, which is so annoying. Because for example, if you put if you have If you're doing something for like a PlayStation controller or using any of the PS4 libraries, and your library is PlayStation with the P and the S capitalized, like how the brand guidelines tell you to, then Unity is going to separate that into two words, play and station. It's like, give me a break, Unity. It also removes underscores from the beginnings of variables. It capitalizes things even like it thinks it's smarter than you, and it drives me crazy.
I like it.
It's another reason why I don't like the inspector. Like it should be named what it's named and not named what it thinks the human, like a different version of it.
I think that like the inspector tool is really meant for like game designers who don't really touch the code very much.
Right, but how many people? There's never someone who only touches the code.
That's what I want to be. Someone who, or I don't want to be the one who only touches the code. I want to be the person who only touches the editor. So that's why I want all my stuff.
There are those people. Yeah.
Yes, I want to be the person who just reads the thing and doesn't have to touch the code if I could.
Right, but I named it those things for a reason.
I know.
And it changes them.
It all makes sense.
It super doesn't. Anyway, that's pretty much it. There's one piece of software I wanted to talk about. There's a couple you could sort of go, but I didn't have too many for a Unity workflow. But one is it's a app called Texture Packer. It is basically it is what it sounds like. It makes your texture atlases for you. The reason I like it, because Unity does have its own texture packing system. So what a lot of people do is they just take all their PNGs, dump them into their project, use them as they need to, and then they'll run the texture packer on build. It makes build times a little longer, but not by much. And it's nice and convenient, works just fine. I use texture packer to create my texture atlases, or my sprite sheets rather, before. And the reason I do that is because in texture packer, the pivot point alignment and 9-slice tools are just way better. In Unity, they're very annoying and finicky, and I hate them. But Texture Packer is a really good one, and so it's a little bit of overhead in some ways. I just like the workflow a little better. So we'll put that link in the show notes, and it's not a free app, but it's worth the money. The company also makes texture illuminators. They can help you make normal maps for 2D sprites, so you can do cool shadow effects. It's a really cool company makes a bunch of really cool apps. But Texture Packer is the one I like for Unity workflow. Not for everybody, but it's good for me. I make all the art in Widget Satchel, and I'm getting it all out, and like dealing with the choosing the alignment or pivot point in a sprite in Unity is just annoying. It's not good. I guess it's gotten better, but anyway. So Texture Packer is a great app. I guess that's kind of it. We can talk about pre-optimization a little bit.
I was just gonna say you don't always need to optimize your things all the time.
Yeah,
because like sometimes that just slows you down.
Right.
I mean, like it's good to make sure that your game is running well and like you have a understandable workflow. And if something is clearly slowing you down and you want to fix that, then like optimization makes sense.
Yeah.
But in other cases, it also, it like being constantly concerned about whether or not your game will run well or whether or not this is the fastest workflow possible will actually slow down your workflow significantly in a lot of cases. So I just want to caution listeners to, take all of our advice, but use it the best way for yourself.
Yeah, I really want to hear, Martha, from you, because the things you work on in your day job, at least when you're doing web stuff, a lot of that goes live either immediately or very shortly. And so you have to deal with that idea of like, this is going to have customers pretty soon on a much faster turnaround and a more iterative process. So what do you do to optimize your code? Like, do you just sort of barf out the first version that works and then fix it later? Or do you...
Yes.
Oh, okay. You don't
Unless I have more time.
You don't ever struggle with like, can I make this a little better? And like, you don't have a lot of time to do that, really.
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
At least in my experience so far.
Yeah.
It's been like, this has to be done today.
do you then go back and sort of optimize things that are out? I mean,
this is real bad because all my answers to these questions are not great. No.
Well, I mean, that's good for people to hear, right?
I mean, if I have time, I usually don't. At least at my old job. We'll see at my new job.
Yeah.
Most of web development is working on stuff that other people have worked on. Yeah. Is really the thing. So I've optimized other people's code.
Sure. Because you had no other choice, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and also just because legacy code is legacy code.
Right.
But which no one can avoid. But yeah.
I'm thinking about what Freya was telling us. Freya Holmer was our guest a couple weeks ago and said that like Unity tutorials will tend to like the rigid, correct way to do it. And that can give you kind of the wrong impression. And I hope listeners take a lot of what we've been talking about the same kind of way, where like if you can't quite get it optimized or like follow all the best practices, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because like Martha's saying, you don't have a lot of time to get it right, but you can still be pretty successful. Like it still works, right?
Right.
Yeah, you can, be like Martha. It's just general good advice.
I want to be the very best.
Oh, yeah?
No one ever was. To catch them is my real test. To train them is my cause. I will travel across the land.
We're doing the whole song.
Searching for mine. We just have to get to the Pokemon part.
Oh, okay. These Pokemon.
To understand the power that's inside. Pokemon
is the topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is my favorite part of this episode because I just get to sit back and not say anything.
Yeah, spoiler alert, Mark doesn't like Pokemon. Boo!
It's not that I don't. I just don't get Pokemon.
He didn't grow up with Pokemon.
And I feel that if I delve into it, I'm going to not like it. So I kind of just keep my distance.
Good call.
What? No.
I don't think you would like Pokemon. A lot of numbers and stuff. Just, a whole lot of that. And
but there's also very cute things.
There are very cute things.
I'm split on that.
They do have robot Pokemon.
See, that's the thing. It's like I look at that and I'm like, maybe I'm really into it. But I don't know. I feel like it's a trap for me.
Yeah.
Lure me with robots.
Well, Pokemon Red and Blue are 20 years old this year.
What? What? Okay.
Yeah. The original Pokemon games in Japan came out in 1996, but we didn't get them here until 1998, I guess.
I was going to say now minus 20.
Yep. Now reading the Wikipedia article on Pokemon and stuff, actually talking about it. Okay, so it was created by Satoshi Tajiri and Ken Sugimori. And so Tajiri came up with the idea because he really liked collecting insects when he was a kid. And he wanted to have a game that invoked that fun of collecting and learning about new creatures and stuff.
Cool.
And one really cool thing, I watched a cool video about how they came up with Pikachu, because Pikachu's kind of like the mascot of all the Pokemon, but they didn't really start out thinking that that's what it was going to be. They just told one of the artists, who is actually a woman, which is cool, Atsuko Nishida. And they just said, make an electric Pokemon and make it cute. And she's like, okay, I really like squirrels, so I'm going to make one that looks like a squirrel. And so she did. And then they're like, well, we like mice better than squirrels, so it's going to be a mouse now. And she's like, okay. And so the name Pikachu Pika is the sound an electric spark makes in Japanese, and Chew is the sound a mouse makes.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they just added them together.
Mm-hmm.
Just now I've learned why Pikachu's tail looks like that.
Did you not?
How would I know that?
Yeah.
It's an electric type.
He wouldn't have known that. He wouldn't have known that.
The whole thing of, like, if you've seen anything of Pokemon, it's Pikachu shocking somebody. It comes out of its cheeks.
I've never seen that. Just I know there are ghost type Pokemon because I just know the weirder types because people talk about them louder and more annoyingly. And so I know that there are a bunch of weird types. I assume there are also regular reasonable types.
There are normal types, yes.
Yeah.
Literally
it's called normal.
Oh my God.
They're just like generic animals, mainly. Or things they just couldn't give a type to. So they just give them normal type.
Haven't they changed some of the normal ones to have like other types with them?
I don't remember the exact Pokemon game that they added this, but this was a balancing change they added in. There used to be a whole bunch of different types, and one of the types is Dragon type, and it was always like the best type because like I think there wasn't enough Pokemon that countered it or something. Mm-hmm. You know how Pokemon works is some types beat other types and blah blah blah. Weaknesses.
It's rock paper scissors.
It's rock paper scissors, but with types. And so Dragon was one of the really powerful ones, and it like could not. I don't think there was enough. It didn't have enough weaknesses, so they added in a Fairy type and a Steel type and a dark type.
I thought you were going to say so they made normal type do really good against it.
No, they didn't. They just added a fairy type, and they changed some of the older Pokemon to be fairy type Pokemon instead of normal type Pokemon. And those beat dragons. I like Pokemon, but I don't actually like the games that much. So I don't pay attention to a lot of them, especially nowadays because I don't watch as many cartoons as I used to. But I learned that fact, which was pretty neat.
Yeah, we'll link a type chart.
Yes.
Because one thing
it needs a chart.
It does need a chart.
There's so many charts. It's so great. Look, here's the chart. You can see which Pokemon do well against each other or which ones do half damage against the other ones if they're weak to it.
You were not kidding.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's actually kind of wild because Pokemon is, a lot of people consider it like a children's thing, especially because the cartoons, are marketed towards children and all of the cute animals and things that you see. But like,
I don't know any children into Pokemon. The only people I know into Pokemon are like 28.
Oh, well, okay. We did grow up with it. But like
my little cousins are into it.
Yeah.
They want Pokemon cards for Christmas and stuff. So
even back in the day though, Pokemon was extremely complicated.
Yeah.
When you if you there are Pokemon tournaments, and if you go to those tournaments and stuff, you have to like breed your Pokemon in a certain way, and you got to make sure that you do it at a certain time or something, or save at a certain time because it's very likely that you'll get this Pokemon in the wild grass that you find Pokemon in, so you can breed more Pokemon to raise them to be like good fighting type things. Yes.
Yeah, there's the nature's, the IVs and the EVs.
IVs and EVs. I don't think we're going to get into details on that because that's too complicated and I don't understand it. But those are things that exist in Pokemon. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry if I shattered your your idea of Pokemon if I brought those up to you. How many Pokemon are in the games now?
100 or 809.
There are 809. They started at 150.
Yeah, and to me, there's only like 250 still.
Yeah. Does that include the variations that they added in the new ones?
Well,
like the Dark Meowth or whatever.
I don't know.
Okay.
I just looked up list of Pokemon on Wikipedia, and it says
you're still scrolling.
Yes.
Oh no.
No, but they have a list of Pokemon generations, and it says that Sun and Moon they added 81 new Pokemon.
Okay.
And that's what happens every time a new release comes. They add a certain amount.
Yes.
Does it just make the total number bigger in that game, or is it those?
It doesn't. Most of the time, you see only the new Pokemon and some of the older ones. A few.
Yeah, they pick a subset of the more popular, older ones and put them into.
Is that just because that's the design choice, or is that because like the Game Boy could only hold so many like sprites?
I think originally it was because the Game Boy could hold only. I think some of the design constraints were because of the hardware at first, but now
now that's part of the. I mean, it's interesting.
I mean, now it just would be weird and not balanced if you had all of them.
Yeah, I'm
like
sure some of
it
the
would
Pokemon
take
were ridiculous or something. And also, you can get access to all of the Pokemon in the newer games. You just have to trade them somehow to get to them or something. The reason why Pokemon has two different versions, Red and Blue and X and Y and Moon and Sun, is because the game developers wanted to encourage players to play with each other and trade amongst another. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you got Red, you wouldn't
each have a different subset.
Yeah. So if you got Red, you wouldn't have access to all the Pokemon, and you got to catch them all. Got to catch them all, Pokemon.
Yeah.
I've
heard that.
So you trade with your friend who has Pokemon Blue, or like if you're a true elite player, you have Pokemon Yellow. That was me.
Pokemon Yellow was the one they made after the TV show came out.
Yes.
And because the TV show focuses on Pikachu, they wanted to make a game that focused on Pikachu, and Pikachu follows you around, not in his Pokeball like the one in the show.
Yeah. And you can you can turn around and talk to Pikachu, and the more you play with him, the more Pikachu likes you. In the beginning, Pikachu's like, "Oh, I can't stand this guy."
But I'm gonna follow him around anyway.
Yeah. And then later, you get little hearts. Pikachu loves you.
That's a big draw of the game for me now, especially that you can in the newer games they have these you can interact with your Pokemon more like a pet and like groom it and give it stuff.
Yeah, they're more than just numbers now.
Yeah. Well, I mean they always had an emotional attachment. That's why Nuzlocke runs. So there's a way of playing the Pokemon game where you, if one of your Pokemon gets knocked out in a battle, it dies and you have to let it go.
Yeah, because normally in Pokemon that is not the case.
Yeah.
You can just heal them and they're back.
So that, like, we'll link to Griffin McElroy's Nuzlocke run.
Of course they'd have a Nuzlocke run.
So emotional. Long live Miss Beekman. Yeah, but in addition to the RPG games, there's been lots of other like spin-off sort of games too. Pokemon is like so prolific in its games and also in everything else that goes along with the games and merchandise and shows and movies and the number of Pokemon that there are. Some of the notable other games are, they made these games called Pokemon Dungeon, I think, and where you got to play as Pokemon in the wild.
They're mystery dungeon games with Pokemon. Yeah.
Is Mystery Dungeon a genre?
I think it is. They have like Final Fantasy versions where you play as a Chocobo and stuff like that.
Oh,
I don't play them. But
is this a case of a Japanese game they have to introduce to Americans by slapping a license that Americans will like?
That might be it. Yeah.
That's how I played Puyo Puyo for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean
Oh,
Machine.
right. Yeah.
And I was like, wait, there are more of these games?
Yeah, that worked on me too.
Nice.
So I played Mario's Picross.
Oh,
on Game Boy.
Yep. Oh, those Japanese, so clever.
Yeah, I felt that twice. Glad I did.
Yeah.
There's also Pokemon Stadium and Pokemon Coliseum, which were for N64 and GameCube. And basically you got to battle Pokemon against your friends.
Yeah.
It was
like in 3D.
Yeah. And there wasn't like really a story. Well, I think Coliseum had a story.
As far as I understand, Pokemon Coliseum was like its own thing, and it wasn't like Pokemon Stadium in that like you battled with. Oh, I think you could battle with your friends.
Yeah.
But like Pokemon
But there's
Stadium,
like the dark thing with the guy with the that could like control your Pokemon
or something.
It was like.
So Pokemon Stadium had a bunch of mini games and stuff, and when I played Pokemon Stadium, I mainly played the mini games because I'm not that much into Pokemon, and the mini games were really fun.
Yeah.
But then Pokemon Coliseum came out, I was like, oh yeah, Pokemon Stadium, but like on the GameCube, yes. And then I get it, and it's like this narrative and story mode, and I'm like, what is this darkness stuff? What is this Pokemon? I don't even know what this is, and I just stopped.
I love how it still surprises me when you bring up narrative, you bring it up in that tone, narrative. I'm like, but that's great, Steven. Oh, right, you don't like it.
I mean, also the Pokemon games don't have good stories.
Yeah,
just gonna say that now.
Address your letters.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that the environmental messages of Pokemon Sapphire and Ruby were kind of cool because like it was the two bad guys instead of being Team Rocket, who are usually the bad guys. It was a two groups that were trying to either cover the whole world in oceans or dry up all the oceans, depending on which version you got.
Sure. They all want to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
like Team Rocket is the original one, and they were like, I just want to control the world with Pokemon. So they effectively just wanted all the money. And then there's that one where one of them wants to dry up all the oceans or not dry up all the oceans. And then like the newest one is like, I think they're all just like gangs or something, and they just want to be recognized as humans. So wait, that one's kind of relevant. I don't know. They're weird. But yeah, they don't do a great job with the narratives. That's what I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. Yes. Also, there's Pokemon Snap. That's a fun game.
That one's been widely seen as like one of the best Pokemon games.
A cult classic.
Mm-hmm. And that's still a spin-off though.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's just sort of like you wander around and take pictures, right?
Yeah. Basically, it's like a shooter, except you're not killing anything. You're just taking photographs and you're trying to get like the best photograph.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
We can link to it. I just watch Polygon all the time. I'll link to a Polygon video where they talk about Pokemon Snap and why it was so cool.
Mm-hmm. I know people wanted that as a mode in Pokemon Go.
Yes.
It just seemed natural.
Right? Yeah, because in Pokemon Go, which is the phenomena that swept the nation, on mobile phones, where you just find Pokemon as you walk around, it would make perfect sense to just try to take photos of the Pokemon like on your house or whatever.
I think probably the reason they didn't put that in is because the AR in that game is garbage. But all those it was before AR Kit and AR Core came out, so maybe we'll see. But it seems like it's more possible now to make that a good mode than it probably was when they made that game originally.
Oh, definitely. There was Hey You Pikachu, which was an N64 game where it was basically kind of like a Tamagotchi, but not really. It was like you just talked to Pikachu, right? And there was like a TV thing.
I always wanted that, and you had to buy a separate thing because you needed a microphone, and N64 didn't have a microphone. So I never was able to play it because I couldn't find the microphone. They had it at Blockbuster.
Did it like plug into the expansion slot on the controller?
I think it
did. A little gooseneck microphone?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then you could be like, Pikachu, and then Pikachu would turn around and look at you. I never had it, but I also always wanted it.
Yeah. Pokemon, there's a game called Pokemon Channel where you like watch TV with Pikachu. Wow, I didn't realize how much of a thing I had with Pikachu. I think I had a pretty strong attachment to Pikachu growing up. But you could just watch channels of Pikachu and stuff, and that was really cool because they had little funny channels and stuff, and it had a really great going to link to and not sing because I don't want to butcher it for people.
Speaking of cool themes, there was like multiple CDs made of just Pokemon songs that people did. Like
probably.
There was one that we listened to still called "To Be a Master."
Oh, from the original.
Yeah. It's got like the Team Rocket's rockin' song.
Yeah,
pretty great.
We'll link to that too. Thanks. So much nostalgia.
And of course, the Poké Rap.
Yes, you gotta have the Poké Rap.
Of course. Can I get a little bit of that from either of you?
I used to know some of it.
Yeah, they rap about all what was originally 150 Pokemon, 51 Pokemon because there was Mewtwo at that.
Pokemon! Zubat, Primeape, Meowth, Onix, Geodude, Rapidash, Magneton, Snorlax, Gengar, Tangela, Goldeen, Spearow, Weezing, Seal, Gyarados, Slowbro! Gotta catch them all!
I could have super guessed that.
Oh, okay. I don't remember the thing.
What was the break? There was a break where they
was anybody here to say anything?
What was anyone? Oh, no one was there to say anything. It wasn't that bad, but I mean, it wasn't much better than that.
Gotta catch 'em all, Pokemon!
Yeah, I don't remember the whole thing. It's good though. It's good though, I swear. Now that I think about it, when Glitch was more of a student group, we used to like play the Pokemon rap when we were at like lounges and stuff.
Yeah.
Our lounges were just people would come and play games and hang out. And so they would sometimes just play the Pokemon rap. It was fun.
Nice.
Yeah. And I still don't remember any of the lyrics. They said Pikachu, I'm sure. But yes, Pokemon it's so prolific now. It has spanned movies. It's got games. It's got TVs. It's got.
You watched mostly the show, right?
I mainly watched the show. I mean, I played Pokemon Yellow and I tried Pearl and then I stopped because I don't like Pokemon enough. The games, anyways. But yeah, I mainly watch the show and stuff.
The show is still going, by the way.
It is. And Ash is still 10. Which is also weird. Because, like, why are you letting your 10-year-old boy run around catching Pokemon when these Pokemon are, like, legitimately extremely dangerous?
Yes. Like, he's almost died multiple times.
Uh-huh. And Ash's mom was just like, keep going, honey. You'll be fine.
Mr. Mime.
Yeah. That show is very
Don't
strange.
forget to change your what. They're pretty formulaic in the show. I always thought when I was a kid that because Pokemon started as games, that the games were better than the show. And then because Digimon started as a show, it was better than the games.
Oh, as a show?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, Digimon was also cool. But I mean, Pokemon is clearly more popular. So
It won the war.
yeah.
One other thing that was I really liked doing that when I was a kid was collecting the trading cards. And me and my brother sometimes played the game, but it was mostly for collecting them and I still have I have a lunchbox full of cards and then a binder with the card holders in it, and they were all in order.
Yeah.
And I remembered when they added new Pokemon that, went in evolution order before the other one. I would like move everything. So I'd spend multiple days like just moving cards like 2 slots over.
It's cool.
But it was great. And me and my brother also would make our own Pokemon cards.
Oh, really?
I think I've talked about this on the show before.
Oh, yeah.
But we would, my aunt wanted us to stamp collect, which like we were super not into because kids are not into stamp collecting. Pro tip. But but we still tolerated it because what the stamps came on were these like great pieces of cardboard that were just the right thickness that they wouldn't break, with multiple like use of the cards that we made out of them, and also were like thin enough. Like they were just the perfect texture and perfect shape to make Pokemon cards with. So that's what I would do a lot. We also had like all the little Pokemon figurines, like you could buy little.
Oh yeah.
Oh, those are the best.
Those were the best.
And I was really into Sculpey clay at the time, so I would make my own with Sculpey clay.
So when you say make your own, did you like literally make your own Pokemon or just make Pokemon you really liked?
Pokemon I really liked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to make your own Pokemon? I've never tried.
You know, I don't know. I think I did try a couple times because there were like type combinations that don't happen.
Yeah.
Oh, Ava's here. Hi, Ava.
Glitch's executive director peeking in through the window.
Yes.
She heard Pokemon and had to appear.
Yeah. Of all the people I know, she's the one who's the most into Pokemon.
Yeah, she's really into Pokemon.
You're saying design your own Pokemon. To me, that feels really simple. Just draw anything and give it a name.
Yeah, you can do that. They have Pokemon who are keys, Pokemon who are trash bags, Pokemon that's ice cream. So like you could just.
I was like, nothing would surprise me, but that surprised me.
The ice cream surprise? You got the garbage bag?
No, that makes perfect sense.
His name is Trubbish. I like him.
Yeah. So you literally could do it. There should be. Yeah, there's Pokemon of everything.
Isn't it the case that the earliest Pokemon had different names in different localities?
Oh, yeah.
But now, because it's such a worldwide phenomenon, they're all just called the same thing everywhere?
Yes, that is the case.
Yeah.
And in fact, and they said this I don't have to describe it. They said it in the Nintendo Direct, the Smash Nintendo Direct. They named all of the different the different characters based off of the names and stuff. And the Pokemon trainers, Pokemon, like they have different yells depending on what language you're using.
Yeah.
So, which is pretty neat, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, like in Pokemon, like they just yell their names because it's easy for. I bet that was because like it was easier for kids to remember their names.
Probably.
Oh yeah,
makes a lot of sense because in the games they just do a generic or something.
Whatever Game Boy could make at the time,
exactly.
And they haven't really updated those in the games, which is really weird.
Yeah,
it's just actually the sound they make is that chiptune sound.
Yeah,
kind of. Yeah,
they've like. I mean, I think they've updated them now, but I remember like playing games that were like, you know,
on the DS or something.
Yeah, and if they still meant that.
Yep.
Yeah. Didn't the games even on the DS like looked like Game Boy games, right? It wasn't until more recently they even put 3D models in it, and even those, from what I heard, were not up to the standard of a 3DS game at the time. But like now, the latest ones, I think they're all in on really like updating all of their old tech debt and like making. But for a while, it was just like people just wanted new Pokemon. They didn't care about the games being better, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure everybody wanted to see their Pokemon in 3D, but like there's a lot of assets they have to make because there's, what did you say it was? 806?
809 now.
809 Pokemon. So, and I don't know if that includes the variations that they added of all the different Pokemon. So like there's so many.
As someone who's recently drawn 30 pairs of socks.
Yeah.
I can tell you, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. yeah, exactly.
And that doesn't compare.
Right. Oh boy. Yeah. Pokemon's pretty great though. At least the show.
At least the show.
What is this jelly jam jar promotion thing? What is that?
Oh, okay. So one of the most popular things around my house,
okay,
and my friend Joey and Michael's house was, for a while they put Pokemon on, like, I forget what's the big jelly company? Yeah, Smuckers. On Smuckers jars, they put Pokemon, and so we would eat all the jam, and then
in one sitting,
and then we used all of those as like cups later for juice and milk and stuff.
Oh, like a mason jar kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Because why you can't throw away the jam jar with Bulbasaur on it. Like,
It's true.
no.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
So
Wait,
then,
but if you wash it once, isn't it ruined?
Oh, it was
the
on
screen
the jar.
printed.
Oh, screen printed on
Yeah.
there.
Oh.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeesh. That's cool.
Yeah.
It was awesome. And oh man, I think we only have one left because they eventually got broken. But
Uh-huh.
what we would do is we would have Pokemon battles against each other
Oh,
at
wow.
dinner.
That's why they got broken.
Sounds right.
Where you'd say what attack you're doing, and then someone would have to take a number of sips of the juice
Uh-huh.
Oh,
and then
cool.
once you got down to the bottom of your glass, you lost.
Oh, wow. That's great. I
Which
love that.
I think my mom appreciated because it was like, then they drink all of their milk or whatever.
And your dad appreciated because it had proper game design elements.
Yeah. So
That's pretty wonderful. I love that a lot.
yeah, so that was one of the best. I don't know if Nintendo realized that was a really great marketing tool, but it was super great.
I just see like the instant connection between a jar like that and the things you use to hold fireflies. Like the metaphor is pretty solid.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was at all part of it, but it's probably just the dump truck of money that went one way or the other.
oh
Yeah.
But
definitely.
Oh, sure. Yep. Yeah.
So do you have a favorite Pokemon?
I like all the weird ones.
I like that ice cream one.
I like the weird ones, like the not popular ones, like what's it, Magmortar, who's like a real ugly looking thing. It's a giant. He's like a giant flame thing with cannons on his arms. It's nasty looking, but I love it. And then like Octillery is just an octopus with like a cannon.
Oh, I
Yeah.
like him.
I think I like all the Pokemon with cannons. The Octillery is one with a cannon on its snout or something, and then there's Fortress that has like cannons. It's like a cloister. What's cloister? Cloister is a
What?
shell.
Oh,
Shell.
yes.
Shell. It's a shell thing, but it's got cannons on its sides. So things with cannons, those are pretty great.
I'm trying to look up online. There's a Pokemon that I might be getting it wrong, but it's like it's just a pile of cables. And I'm like, that's cool. But every time I search for that, they're like, charge up your phone with these cables for Pokemon Go.
Are you talking? There's Tangela. That's a thing of vines. It's just a bunch of vines. That's
No, I'm thinking of like a Pokemon I would find in my junk drawer.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Well, there's one that just is like a ghost, but can inhabit any like
Rotom.
Yeah,
Yeah?
Rotom.
That's one of my
He's
favorites,
great
too.
because when it inhabits a appliance, it takes on the type that would go with that. So like if it inhabits a oven, it will be a fire type.
Yeah.
And if it's
There's a washing machine.
Yeah.
And having a washing machine becomes a water type, which is pretty cool. This isn't the one you're talking about, Mark? Tangela?
No.
Okay.
I like that one though. That one's just like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
literally.
Oh, we haven't talked about like some of the dark stuff about Pokemon. This is probably the stuff. You may have already heard this stuff because I think this is the kind of stuff that people like talk about on internet all the time, Mark.
Yeah.
But so like for example, there's Clefable and what's the ghost variation? Gengar, yes. So like I guess in the lore possibly like Clefable is just a normal type. I think it's a normal fairy type now. But like it has it's just like a happy-go-lucky Pokemon or something. And then there's this other Pokemon named Gengar that is
Gengar.
Yeah. that looks actually very similar to the Clefable Pokemon. But it's like purple. And it's a ghost Pokemon, and it looks evil and all this other stuff. And its weight is just slightly under the weight of the Clefable. And I guess in like lore or something, there's like a weight of a soul.
Oh, 21 grams?
Yeah. And the Gengar is missing 21 grams off of the Clefable.
Ooh.
Yeah. And actually there's like a whole lot of there's a lot of those Pokemon things. There's some weird, creepy stuff.
Well, even just the flavor text in the original and like the main games can be really creepy.
Yeah.
Like
it's got like a grim fairy tale kind of vibe to it that you don't get from say like the show.
Right, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
None of that shows up in the show.
Well, some of it does.
Well, I mean,
there's the first episode I ever saw was one where the Ghastly was like haunting this statue of this woman that had died, and everyone thought it was.
Oh yeah,
and it was really sad because the guy was yeah,
that's true.
It was.
They do some of that kind of stuff, but I don't think it gets as dark as at least in the games themselves.
That's true. Yeah. That's very true.
Well, isn't there like famously, this is one I read about, which is a Pokemon that wears the skull of its mother on its head?
Yes.
What's the name of that Pokemon?
Cubone.
Cubone.
Yeah.
Cubone. Yeah, and then they wear the skull of their mother on their heads. It's kind of creepy.
And the weird thing about that to me is, I guess I don't know enough about Pokemon, but like that's a type of Pokemon. So there are a lot of them out there?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a relatively rare one.
I think so, yeah. But it's still, I always found that strange because there had to be a Cubone that existed that was not wearing the skull, right? So it's just a regular Cubone that didn't have a skull on its head. So where's that Cubone?
Like, I guess structurally, like from a storytelling perspective, something about that is interesting. It's the idea that like the only ones that ever exist all have that same tragic backstory.
Yeah.
And it has a fairy tale quality to it that like there's something otherworldly and bizarre about that being true. But I think that's just a consequence of their like weird design process rather than an interesting meta narrative on storytelling.
Yeah. There's a Pokemon called Driftbloon.
Yeah. That was the one I was going to talk about.
Yeah, that's a ghost. Is it wind? What's the air type? Flying type, ghost flying type. And it's
a balloon.
It's a balloon, of course. And it wraps its little strands around children and will take it up in the sky, and then you see it again.
Terrifying.
Yep. That might have something to do with why I don't like Pokemon games as much. Not into spooky things. But I do kind of find all of this stuff really fascinating, especially that they put all of this stuff in like what a lot of people would consider kids' games.
Yeah, it feels like you could take the premise of any one of these weird ones, just make a horror movie out of that alone.
Why haven't they done? They do creepypastas, but why haven't they made a horror movie out of this stuff yet?
Like someone should just license that single idea and just make an unrelated horror movie with that premise.
Yeah.
Actually, yes. Very good idea.
So if Game Freak licensed Pokemon to you, or the Pokemon company licensed Pokemon to you, what would you make?
Pokemon MMO. It's the first thing anybody ever thinks of, I think.
Pokemon MOBA.
Yeah. Oh, a MOBA?
Yeah. I think I've talked about this before.
Yeah, you have, I think. But let's hear it again.
But an MMO would be great because then you could...
Then you just battle other people. It's just Pokemon, but you can battle other people. That's what Pokemon Go should be, but instead it's not that. But how does this MOBA work? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the Pokemon have 4 moves. So that makes sense. You got your 4 moves of your MOBA person.
Sure, yeah.
And then you evolve when you go up levels.
Okay.
And the type thing would be what would be difficult because...
Yeah, how would that translate into a MOBA? That would make sense. Well, you could have it so that like electric types are like
Well, MOBAs are about lane control, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
wouldn't it be a matter of like watching the other player to see what type they're sending your way and then countering that?
Yeah, I
It'd
guess
be a
it
little
would
more
be just like...
strategic than MOBAs normally are. But it could totally work with that system.
They do that some in MOBAs now.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to say is like they have certain roles in MOBAs and like maybe certain types are best on particular roles. So like a support type could be like the fairy Pokemon or something. And like those would like heal people and stuff. But like maybe your opponent sees that and then picks a ghost type, which I think counters fairies.
Yeah.
And a ghost could also be like a support type.
If you use that whole chart that Martha scared me with, you could make the most complicated MOBA in history.
Oh yeah.
Would be awesome.
I'd get behind that. I always wanted a Pokemon game that was like a fighting game, but we have that now, so I don't need it anymore.
Pokken or Pokemon?
Pokken tournament, yeah.
Is it any good?
I haven't played it.
It's just Tekken with Pokemon characters.
No,
right?
if it was Tekken, I would hate it. So it's not Tekken.
So for the purposes of your ever playing it, we'll just say it's not that
Yes.
then? All right, got it. There is a Pokemon game I would like to make.
Oh, yeah?
If I was given the license, I would make like a Sim City kind of thing. You build the village, and then you have like the forest where you can manage that. So you don't just build buildings, but you manage like you do agricultural landscaping to like I don't know. It seems kind of fun.
Attract different Pokemon.
So I don't really know the rules of Pokemon, but it just seems to me like I would like to build a house for them all.
No,
Like a little apartment complex for like the one that's a pile of magnets. Like I just make it out of plastic. Like,
that's kind of cool. I like that idea. Yeah.
Then all the stats and numbers which I don't like, I'd be happier dealing with that as a data set if I had a different motivation for playing.
Sure.
Just to have them all live together in a way, which is like that's not a thing I want all games to do, but it's that appeals to me into like the city planning type.
Yeah,
things.
so you'd make your own like Pokemon city, and depending on how you built it, like that would determine the type of your city, because every city has their own gym leader or whatever, and that determines they have like a particular focus of type, like there's a poison type gym.
I don't know about all that, but I would definitely have, as a feature of the game, building walls around the city to keep out 10-year-olds.
All you need to do is
call it Pokemon Preserve.
Pokemon Preserve. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I like that a lot.
You could be the manager of the Poké Safari.
Oh yeah, isn't there a Pokemon Safari game or something? There probably is. There's a Pokemon Ranger game where you just make sure Pokemon are okay, and you help them with your helper Pokemon or something. Yep.
Pokemon's pretty great. That's my conclusion. And some of the reasons why it's really great is that my mom has this theory is that the reason why I got into bugs and like science stuff is because I memorized all the Pokemon and what types they were, and like it teaches kids taxonomy because like, oh, this evolves into this and stuff like that.
That's true.
That's really cool. It's comes full circle then, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, because it's back to bug collecting.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know. I mean, it seems it's true for you, it seems, but it also sounds really idealized. I wonder if that's a common thing, or you're just like, you just particularly grasped onto that part of it.
Yeah.
Because, it doesn't, sometimes things inspire things and then it's not always the intent for that to come through. That just becomes the catalyst. But for you, it was something that like got you into that. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of other kids grew up with and developed those interests.
Let us know. Feedback. And that's it. Wait, no, what is it? Contact.
Games.club/feedback.
Yeah. Yep.
That's our show. If you haven't already, subscribe to Nice Games Club in your favorite podcast app and be sure to give it a good review if you liked it or are nice like us. We really do need to know you're out there, so leave a review and tell all your friends too. We also want to hear directly from you, so follow us on Twitter and all the other things at Nice Games Club. And email us at contact@nicegames.club. Lastly, you can find out more about the show and your nice host, as well as get all the links and show notes from this and other episodes at nicegames.club.
So until one day soon, we start again, remember to
play nice
and make nice. So, I'm sorry, this is not great content, but so we could probably cut this out.
Yeah, probably.